Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. I learned an extremely valuable lesson during my early years as an entrepreneur, which is that if you want to make a lot of money, stop thinking about making money and start thinking about making a difference, which is a pretty difficult thing to do when you're broke and you're trying to pay rent on a monthly basis. But once you have this epiphany, everything changes. And I can absolutely say that I've had plenty of opportunities to test that theory over the years. And the time or two that I've strayed from it, my business has shrank and I paid a price. And every time that I've kept the mission and service that I had as the top priority, my businesses grew. Well, today's lesson with Tom Bilyeu is an incredible story that will confirm these words of wisdom for you once and for all. Tom is one of three founders of Quest Nutrition, which was the second fastest growing company in America last year with over $1 billion in revenue. So what the hell do they do? Well, as with most great businesses, they were inspired by a personal problem. They were a health-conscious trio, but couldn't find a protein bar that they actually wanted to eat, a product that was made with the highest quality ingredients and that wasn't filled with sugar, but that still tasted great and that you actually wanted to eat. So within a few weeks, they were mixing ingredients and cutting out their first sets of bars by hand in a rented commissary kitchen. Challenges, of course, ensued. Money was hemorrhaging out the door, but as with every great tale of victory, persistence paid off. Within the next 48 months, they'd become a billion-dollar company with a mission that had grown far beyond protein bars. Their quest today is to end metabolic disease and the nasty conditions that creates, like obesity and diabetes. So at the end of the day, this interview with Tom contains the secret to incredible success in life and in business. You can substitute their product, their idea, or their industry with whatever you want. If you keep the same recipe that they've used for purpose, mission, values, friendship, and growth, you will have the ingredients you need to achieve the same wildly successful outcome. So please help me welcome somebody that I consider an inspiration and a mentor, Mr. Tom Bilyeu. Tom Bilyeu, welcome to Self-Made Man.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, likewise. This is an episode that I've been super excited about. I've been looking forward to tremendously because you guys have managed to do something at Quest that is my biggest dream and biggest goal, which is to take your little startup and to scale it into a global powerhouse with an amazing culture, an amazing product. And so I'm really thrilled that you're here to join us on the show and to really talk about that subject specifically, which is, where did Quest begin? Where did the idea come from? How were you guys inspired to start the company? And ultimately, how in the world have you managed to grow it to the point that you have? And I have to say, every single gas station that I go into these days, and it's been this way for almost a year, there are Quest bars there. So
yeah, I like your gas stations already. They're my kind of people. So Quest is a company born out of misery, and I really wish that weren't true, but that sadly is the case. My partners and I had built a successful technology company before this. That company in 2010 was named as the 42nd fastest growing company in North America by Deloitte & Touche. And we were making money, we're winning awards, we're standing in this beautiful conference room overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And we turned to each other and we're like, we're completely miserable. And we were living the cliche of money can't buy you happiness, which is hysterical because we're three guys that really believe in the power of money. Not because we want to swim in our money like Scrooge McDuck. That's not at all interesting to us, but because we understand that money is the great facilitator. And if you want to accomplish this incredibly cool stuff, it's going to take access to resources. Now, you can go out and ask of the people to donate their resources to that cause, or you can generate the resources yourself. But either way, you're going to need access to resources. So there we were in this just absolutely ridiculous emotional equation of making more money than we've ever made in our lives and being completely emotionally bankrupt. So we decided that at the height of our success in technology, which is where everybody's trying to get to, that was the dream, right? We decided we're going to sell it and we're going to do something. And we weren't saying we don't want to be in technology, but what we were moving towards something a little bit different. which was we wanted to believe in what we were doing every day. And we asked ourselves a simple question, which Quest ends up being the answer to, which is, what would you do every day that you would love, even if you were failing? And that idea of even if you were failing, that you would find passion, because we'd learned the flip side of that coin, which is there are some things you can do that even if you're succeeding, you're not having fun. And enjoying what you do is not only good for business because it makes you more resourceful, and it just, man, you're going to be there because you want to be there. And there's real energy. There's a contagiousness to that. But, also it's fun, and who doesn't want to have fun? And, I think for me, and the three of us actually founded the company for very different reasons. But for me, really wanting to tap into joy and to passion, and to really actually enjoy what I do every day and acknowledge that that's part of the truth of me, is that, hey, I like to have fun. That was a big deal in why we founded the company the way that we did. The specifics of it being a food company came down to really most powerfully for me. And again, my partners would have to answer for themselves. But from my standpoint, the reason that I wanted to do it was I grew up in a morbidly obese family, and people that I loved, I knew were going to die way too soon because nobody was making food that they wanted to eat, that they were moving towards, that they coveted, that, when they were thinking about that fantasy meal, none of it was good for you. So it was fun to eat for sure, but it was moving people backwards from just health and longevity perspective. So we felt like that was a question that we could answer, that we could make food, and here I am thinking about, especially my mom and my sister, two people that I love, that had struggled with weight. I wanted to make food that they could choose based on taste, and it happened to be good for them. So that was the reason behind getting into food in particular. But then there's all kinds of other knock-on reasons as well.
Well, let's dive into the philosophy behind your products, because, when you go to any sports store, bicycle shops that I've been into, gas stations, whatever, there are a couple of brands that are really familiar to everybody at this point: Kind bars, Power bars, Cliff bars. And a lot of them, especially, and this is just kind of my take on it, or view on it, when it comes to like Power bars or Cliff bars, they're almost like candy bars at this point. And yes, it might be the best choice compared to a Snickers, but at the same time, I'm dissuaded from even eating those at this point because, man, there's no escaping the sugar.
There is no escaping the sugar. I mean, that is really well said. And that was the founding principle of the company was, hey, look, there's all these protein bars on the market. In fact, in 2009, between flavors from companies that currently exist and just entirely new companies, there was, I think, roughly 1,600 new bars introduced into the marketplace, and the category was still declining. So you have a declining category that is just massively saturated. And here we were saying, we're going to come in and we're going to add to it. One guy actually said these words. This is not a paraphrase. This is a quote. I need another protein bar like I need another hole in the head. And so our thing was, well, despite there being all those protein bars on the market, there's not a single one that the three of us will eat. They're either good for me and taste terribly, or they taste good, but they're terrible for me. So let's really do the hard work. Let's make one that's both. It tastes good and it's good for you. And that was how we gained the market share that we gained, because there was a lot of people like you that felt underserved. They recognized that protein bars up until we came along were candy bars in disguise. And that actually was one of our first marketing message, the first protein bar that's not a candy bar in disguise. And, just going back to stripping things away. And again, an early message for us was famous for what we don't have, because our goal was just get the sugar out so that sugar wasn't even an ingredient in our facility. And that was way harder than it sounds. And really was the contribution that we made to the industry was learning how to produce, not formulate, learning how to produce product that didn't have sugar, because all the equipment that existed had grown up over the last, let's say, 70 years, has grown in lockstep with high fructose corn syrup. So once you strip out the high fructose corn syrup, then you start running into manufacturing challenges. And that's really where we've excelled and how we've been able to do something that no one else had.
Interesting. And I'm sitting here, wondering and asking myself, how in the world you guys figure this out? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but this was all of y'all's first foray into the food world.
It is, yeah. So at least from a business standpoint, the three of us have been obsessed with nutrition for a long time. And my business partner, Ron. And so, by the way, because I'll refer to the three of us a lot, there's Ron, Mike, and myself. Ron he is so fascinated by the nutritional challenges, nutritional science in general, just has a real love affair with the acquisition of that knowledge. And one of the things I remember when we were looking for what should that next company be, that was one of the things that he was saying, I could really get into the nutrition side. And I was like, oh my gosh, if we could take advantage of how obsessively you study nutrition, that would be amazing. And then, lo and behold, we also get to take advantage of my other business partner, Mike, the fact that he grew up on an Iowa farm. So how we figured this out is really comes down to one thing. The three of us believe that you can truly learn anything you set your mind to. So just because we don't know food now doesn't mean we can't know food. And I would put us against somebody that has a lifetime of food experience, but has a fixed mindset and sort of believes, this is as good as I'm ever going to be. And so I know what I know and that's it. And you're not going to come in and change my ways. I would much rather bet on somebody like us who's like, hey, I don't know it now, but man, I'm willing to learn. I will put myself at the feet of anybody. I don't consider anyone to be inferior to me. I'll take every opportunity I can to learn. My mind is open to new ways of doing it, either better ways that already exist, meaning modifications of things that already exist, or completely reimagining it and doing it in a completely different way, which is we had to do really a hybrid of the two things. So that mindset really helped us grow where other people just saw, obstacles. We saw ways around it.
So how long did it take you guys to go from an idea and an agreement, if you will, to first delivery of your first, shipment of product?
It's about 18 months. So from the time that we started really taking it seriously and playing with formulation and then realizing that formulation is only part of the problem, and then you have to make it shelf stable, and then realizing once you have a formula that's shelf stable, that then you have to worry about manufacturing at a scale because you can't use rolling pins forever. Sort of learning all of those lessons was about 18 months, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine. I'm going through a similar process right now with my new venture, where I'm leaping out of the information and publishing space into my very first physical product and the hydroponic food production space. And so, I've been working with an industrial design firm for about a year and a half, and we're essentially inventing a brand new technology for growing organic produce in your house in a fully automated fashion. So I'm asking you these questions because y'all went from, industry A that was completely unrelated to industry B, and you managed to bridge the gap in a hugely successful way. And so, all of these insights are super valuable because I find myself, navigating a minefield that I'm just completely unprepared to navigate at this point because it's a brand new experience. And so I can really relate and appreciate to the challenges that you guys went through, getting this up and running.
All right, I'm going to give you two things that are going to help you immensely. One, it's so powerful what you don't know. Because the only thing I will tell you is 3 years from now, you're going to look back and say, if I had known all of this, if I had really known how hard it was going to be, I don't know if I would have pushed forward. So that's amazing. Be super excited that you have that working for you right now. It's what we call the naivete of the beginner, right? And one of my favorite stories is of the mathematician. I always forget his first name. His last name is Danzig. He shows up, misses a test or something one day and comes into the classroom and written on the board or the homework assignments. And he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I missed this. He takes down the homework assignment, goes home. He's working on it. He's like, these problems are impossible. This is crazy. But he's like, yeah, I can't have missed, that last class and then not turn this in. I've got to keep going. So he keeps working on it, misses the deadline again. He's freaking out. He finally finishes the problems. He turns them in at like 2 a.m. or something, puts them on his teacher's desk without saying a word, doesn't even want his professor to know it was him, turns them in. And then like 3 days later, his professor comes knocking on his door at like really late at night and says, you've got to come with me right now. We've got to get these published. Those two problems were examples of unsolvable mathematical equations, and you've just solved them both.
Wow.
And he goes on to win the highest level. I forget the name of the mathematics award, but it's the highest award in mathematics. And his whole thing was, I just thought it was homework. And so because I didn't know it was meant to be impossible, I just kept going till I figured it out.
That's awesome.
And I have to credit a ton of Quest's success to that. And so I will say that's serving you well right now. Don't worry about that. And then the other thing, keep your eye on that prize of I'm trying to deliver this value, right? And I'm open to going wherever the road takes me. And I have no idea where this is going to be right now. But man, I'm going to learn to love the immediacy of overcoming the challenges. And that was one thing that my partners and we used to talk a lot about, like, let's have fun doing this, right? Like, okay, this is a challenge. I got it. But let's really, as we solve it, let's enjoy it. Let's enjoy that we overcame that one and then the next one and you enjoy overcoming that. And so it just becomes an expression of your innate personality, right? The fact that you're doing this show, you've got an inquisitive mind. You're willing to learn from people. Like you just want to start celebrating that and all of these victories that you're going to have along the way. And over a long enough time frame, you'll crush it.
A lot of wisdom there for sure. One question that I've been thinking about here over the past few minutes is how you and the other two founders navigate your leadership roles. And the way that I've thought about this in the past when I've had business partners in my last two companies is there are times when two captains can be an issue. Meaning if one captain wants to steer to the right a little bit, the other wants to go to the left a little bit, and you have mutual respect for that other individual, and so you kind of let them take the wheel, and then it comes back the other way. You end up really going nowhere. And so how do you guys navigate that with three people?
That is one of the central focuses of our partnership, was having to figure that out. And here's the thing, it is exactly like a marriage. And I mean that in all the ways. So I would say that my partnership with Mike and Ron is the second greatest love affair of my life. The first being my wife. And no one's had a bigger impact on me and the way that I view the world than those two guys, except for my wife. I mean, it really is sort of that profound. And in falling in love with them and realizing what amazing human beings they are, and just like how they have my best interests at heart, and and the way that we sum it up with each other is, look, if I'm ever in a Thai prison, I'm going to call my wife, and my wife knows to call you two, right? Like that's how this is going to work. And you two are tasked with getting me out of the Thai prison, and I for you, right? So if you're ever trapped somewhere, you can just count on us to get you out. And knowing that you have two people that won't relent until they're able to help you, gives such a tremendous amount of trust. Now, that doesn't help with the problem that you're talking about, which is the company's going nowhere. What does help with that is a couple things. So one, I prioritize my highest value, even in business, is camaraderie. So the connection that I feel with these guys. So the company going nowhere, that's not stressful for me. Ruining my relationship with my business partners, that is stressful. So I prioritize that. So one is just, hey, if the ship doesn't go anywhere, but you love the people that you're working with, you have tremendous respect for them, and you value that experience with them more than the on-paper accomplishments, then you'll never have to worry. But if you're like the three of us and you're also hyper ambitious and you don't want to choose between the camaraderie and the success, then it comes down to the last piece, which is we divvy the world up. And the three of us, each one of us takes essentially with an iron fist one of three areas. So we have product, we have process, and we have people. And each one of us takes one of those areas. So my partner, Ron, like I was saying, he was just absolutely obsessed with nutritional discovery, with learning about nutrition and metabolism. He loves it so much, and he's got such a great mind for it. There's nobody better, certainly not of the three of us, to handle that. Mike is very much has an engineer's mind. He's process driven. He's hyper fiscally responsible, like all the things you would want in the guy handling the process. And that's where he wants to be, just from what makes him feel good and enjoy his day. And then I take people. And so I do the sales and marketing and human resources, company culture, that kind of stuff, because that's where I spend my time thinking about those things, whether it applied to the business or not. I'm utterly fascinated by psychology. I'm utterly fascinated by helping other people. Like, I'm just wired for that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm wired to find absolute intrinsic pleasure inside myself, seeing other people succeed. That's just cool for me. So to have a company that is helping them, and to feel like I've played some small role in somebody losing 100 or 150 pounds or adding muscle, or, whatever their journey is, having contributed to that, super meaningful to me. So when something comes in conflict and we're both trying to steer the ship in opposite directions, you've got the true brotherhood love that we have for each other. So already I just want these guys to win, and hopefully they want me to win as well. You've got the full respect of knowing that their perspective in their area is just absolutely critical. And they've earned that right over time. Each of us have with each other. And then that based on their skills and what they're doing, that at some point you're going to just say, okay, cool. I'm going to trust that in this area, you've shown the predilection for being right more often than not. So if we're really feeling strongly, I'm still going to relent and let you steer the ship. And then the last sort of piece of all this is we all have veto chips. So even though I know that you know that area better, and even though you've fully got my respect and my love and admiration, and I want you to win, I just cannot bear, for whatever reason, making that decision. And so I'm going to play a veto chip.
Have you ever had to use that? Anyone on the team?
I don't know that I've ever had to fully play a veto chip, to be honest. Maybe once. And we've been working together now for 13 years. So, and the key with that is if you abuse it, if you're trying to veto everything, then it totally loses its meaning. And part of this, look, I can't remember who said it now, but a relationship, a marriage, succeeding or failing is like 85% selection. And if you don't know how to select the right person, none of this is going to work, because someone could very easily read my personality and say, oh, okay, great. This guy loves and cares about me, respects me, wants me to win. Cool. I'm going to take advantage of that. And then I start to feel like the chump. Now I'm going to rebel against you. And now we've got an ugly dynamic. So it can happen for sure. So you really do need three people that want that harmony, that want each other to win, that understand that we're all trying to build something big. There's just a lot of things that certainly need to line up. And then you've got to manage the relationships.
So we've got a lot of solo entrepreneurs who listen to this show who are at an inflection point in their business where they have an opportunity to really start growing it and to build their first team, and who have a lot of really big ambitions. How do you do that for the first time? And I know that's a really open-ended question, but I was sitting down with my friend, I don't know if you know Tucker Max here in Austin, but he's doing that with his company called Book in a Box for the first time as well. And we found it really ironic that between the two of us, we only found one book out there that we felt really provided a blueprint or a roadmap for that, which was Double Double by Cameron Herold. Where did you guys learn how to do that? Was it just by the seat of your pants over the last 13 years, or did you have mentors?
Both. So it has largely been by the seat of our pants. And my partners were actually working together for 14 years before I met them. So you put those two guys together, and I think they've been working now for 26 years, something like that. And 27. So just so much history of learning and refining and taking a mentor wherever we could. And then most mentors aren't going to come to you. You're going to have to read books and all of that to get a sense. But, a lot of this stuff just comes down to making mistakes, admitting you made a mistake, learning from that, and then doing something different. And so if I can point to Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, as being probably the most powerful tool for anybody who's trying to build a company from the ground up, that is just absolutely incredible, because for those who haven't read it, and I hope that is a just ridiculously small number, but if you have a fixed mindset, you believe your talents and your intelligence are fixed and they're never going to improve. Couple that with the reality that every human being needs to build self-esteem. There needs to be something that they feel good about. You put somebody who thinks, okay, this is it. It's as smart and as good as I'm ever going to be, and I need to feel good about that. All of a sudden, you see people arguing for dumb ideas just because they were their idea. You see people doubling down on a position that just doesn't make any sense because they don't want to admit that they're wrong. Contrast that with somebody who has a growth mindset, and their whole thing is, I just want to get better. And when they just are really focused on, I just want to get better, they'll take a great idea from wherever it comes. They know at any point they can improve and add a new skill. That sets you up for entrepreneurial success, because however good you may be at the inception of the company, if you've got, let's say, 5 employees and you're doing, I don't know, a couple $100,000 a year in revenue, the gap between that and $1 billion business, you'll have to change as a human being. Like, there won't be virtually anything recognizable in your day-to-day skill set usage when you're a billion-dollar company than when you were the startup. It's so radically different. And the only people that are going to be willing to constantly evolve and admit their need to change are going to be people who have a growth mindset. They're inquisitive. They're driven to learn something new. That's just the only way for it to work.
I'll admit my biggest challenge in this entire process has been the fact that I'm a really big introvert. I love, just being alone and quiet and writing and being creative, which is really, because I would have guessed the opposite about you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. And I would have guessed the opposite about you. And I should have known better that everyone thinks, especially because I have essentially a podcast, that, oh my gosh, you must be so outgoing. And to be honest, like, being extroverted is a technique that I have learned is very effective to getting what I want. And therefore, I have cultivated that technique. But truth be told, how do I recharge? What do I do when I really need to feel centered? I need to be alone. I need to read, write, anything that allows me to be by myself. So those are the times when I'm certainly at my most energized and centered.
So that's really interesting, because the conclusion that I'm coming to, and again, hearing you share your experience here, is that the change that I would have to go through in order to get from where I am today to building a $100 million business is centered around people. I've studied Branson and his work for many years. I've gotten to spend a couple of weeks with him, and for him, it's always the same. It's people, 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 and that is becoming advice that I'm hearing from every super successful business owner and founder. And yet that is where my natural tendency is the weakest. And so how did you navigate that?
I'm in a very lucky position because I have two other partners who get to really hone their skills in other areas, because while people is critical, and I totally agree that if you could only focus on one, that might be the right one to focus on. But if you want your life to go much, much easier, you also need an amazing product. So you need somebody who's really focused on that as well. And then if you're like us and you're making that product yourself, even if you're not, to be honest, there's so much process that goes into running a business. Having one person try to do all three of those really, really well is so nasty. But being able to split them up has been a big hack for us. But the reason that people is so powerful, and the reason that I think that that's probably very well placed energy for you, and the thing that I didn't see coming from having run a much smaller business until now, is humans are a fascinating, oftentimes self-destructive species. So one of the things that you have to do is know how to get everyone aligned. Because think about it, if you're doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, you probably have several hundred to possibly 1,000 or more employees. And when you find yourself in that situation, the law of tribes kicks in, right? So a tribe can be between 100 to 150 people max. Anything more than that, and they will begin to splinter within your own company. So if you have 300 people in your company, you have at least two totally different universes of people. And in truth, it's probably going to break up much smaller than that. And you're going to have a lot more factions, and you're going to have to find ways to keep them all focused on the same mission, to not have internecine battles. And there's that great quote. Unfortunately, I forget who said it, but the great quote about how empires are not toppled by somebody from the outside, they rot from within. And as you grow your company, you'll very quickly see, and I'll say that the break probably happens around 50 employees, where you go from, hey, you're the charismatic leader, people hear you, they see how you act, and they follow suit. So if you're hardworking, driven, open-minded, you've got a growth-oriented mindset, you're willing to take advice and criticism, and people see that, they think, oh, wow, like I want to be like that too. So they become very open-minded. Around 50 people, you just can't have enough one-to-one interaction. People, they're in a separate office, even if it's just down the hall. They just don't see all the little nuances of your decision-making process. So now subcultures begin to fester, and learning how to get a handle on that is so critical. And then just getting amazing talent, right? You can't do this all yourself. Ron, Mike, and I, we are well aware that the three of us could not build a company of this magnitude if it were just us. Like, we're desperately doing a talent land grab, trying to get the most amazing, enthusiastic, passionate, growth-minded people from anywhere that we can to come and believe in our mission, believe in what we're trying to accomplish, and become part of it. Without that, you're just never going to go anywhere.
What are some of the most valuable lessons that y'all have learned when it comes to hiring? You know, I had an opportunity to spend a half a day with Gary Keller here in Austin, who's the founder of Keller Williams, which is the largest private real estate company in the United States. I don't know how many employees they have exactly. I know it's probably 500 plus. And they do close to $1 billion a year in revenue. And the message that he essentially had to share with me was just focus on finding these key 3 to 5 people who are essentially your top line C-level, executives, and make sure they fit this specific type of personality profile. And, that's half of the battle. So what are some of the biggest lessons learned that you guys could offer when it comes to that process?
Finding the culture before you worry about the skill set is critical. So we're always looking for cultural fits. So our interviewing process is a little bit weird. Personally, and in the beginning, this was the sum total, but personally, I don't read resumes. The only time I ever take a resume is if somebody has a weird name and I'm afraid I'm going to forget it. I might hold on to the resume just so I have that. But beyond that, the reason I don't look at their resume is twofold. One, it tells me where you've been. It does not tell me where you're going and the price you're willing to pay to get there. And that's really what I care about, right? Because I'm going to be taking advantage of the arbitrage that happens from the moment I hire you until the moment you leave. Hopefully you're progressing and growing and getting better. And if you are, then that arbitrage is one of the very things that makes our business work. The other is that you need somebody with a growth mindset, right? So the reason that is so incredibly important is, one, it's the thing that facilitates the company getting along because you don't have people entrenching in politics, getting dogmatic about their ideas, because ideas with people that have a fixed mindset quickly calcify, and then you lose that nimble nature that a startup needs. And being nimble, being fast moving is something that as you grow, everything about your organization will try to chip away at that unintentionally. It's just the nature of the beast, but you need to really focus on keeping that. And one of the ways that you do that is hiring. Well, and to be fair, I should go back and say that your culture needs to be something that is very specific that will serve you when you find people that are of that culture. So the culture at Quest is driven by a growth mindset, a belief that you can do anything you set your mind to. And then we have 3 key things that we look for in any employee. And I think these are universally beneficial, though I know some people would disagree. But the 3 things that we look for in any hire are, you have to have grand ambition. The reason you need to have grand ambition is what we're trying to do here at Quest is so big, we're all going to seem crazy if you don't also have grand ambition. Now, it doesn't need to be our same grand ambition. We're here to end metabolic disease. That's massive. And of course, people are always telling us you can't do it. It's impossible, which is fine. But I know if you believe that it's impossible, this is probably not the company for you. So somebody with grand ambition, they'll fit right in. The next thing is drive. I'm not interested in empty dreamers. So I show up every day saying, what can I do today to take a very real step towards ending metabolic disease? And if you don't have the drive to first recognize the gap in skill set between who you are today and who you need to become in order to actually execute on your goal of ending metabolic disease or whatever your goal is, you're never going to get there. So empty dreamers, there's a beauty to the dream, but it can pacify you. When people think about the dream, it can pacify them into thinking they're actually making progress and they're not. So you've got to have the drive to take the very real concrete steps moving forward to gain the skills that you need to accomplish it. And then the third, and this is the one that's maybe a little bit weird because you're going to find a lot of people have ambition, a lot of people have drive, but that's usually married to a hyper competitive mentality. And I'm not looking for that. While I love people that are competitive, way more important to me are people that are compassionate. And the reason I want people that are compassionate is we're going to have to work together as a team. And the only way that a team works is if you can actually enjoy your teammate's success. If you can enjoy seeing somebody on your team shine and do well, you'll support them. And in turn, they'll support you. And if you don't have a fixed mindset and don't need it to be your idea, and you actually derive your sense of self-esteem on identifying the right answer and pursuing it faster and with more enthusiasm than anybody else, suddenly you have this culture where people actually want your idea to be great because they would love to see you be happy from that and see something great come out of it. And then they derive their self-esteem by saying, oh my gosh, look at Bob. Bob's idea is amazing. I'm going to champion Bob's idea because it's so fantastic. And they feel good about themselves for not, getting dogmatic, not worrying about their own idea, not being selected, that they just really are able to put all that ego aside and say, man, this idea is great and I'm really going to work my ass off to make it come to fruition. When you have that and everybody's like that, so sometimes, hey, it is my idea and that feels cool, but when it's not, I'm totally fine with that. Then you've got an army of people pushing the right idea forward. So if you've got a culture like that, then hiring for culture is absolutely critical because you can't let fixed-minded, toxic people get into the organization and start chipping away at that environment. Because a big key to that type of environment is vulnerability. I don't know if you've read Brene Brown and some of her amazing work on vulnerability, but being able to come in and be yourself, be your authentic self, be passionate, be excitable, it all adds up to business results as much as I never would have believed it 10 years ago.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody who's listening to this is feeling the same way I am, but you are an absolute fountain of knowledge. And I'm thinking about Inside Quest and why you guys decided to start that. So for those who are not familiar with it, Inside Quest is essentially, the podcast that Tom runs over in the company. And it is also a video shoot, if you will. But the format I thought is really interesting, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially a town hall learning opportunity for all of your team members there over at the corporate. Is that correct?
It is. That's how I justified in the early days doing it. But the truth is I was once in the matrix. I had a mindset that held me back. I didn't know it was my mindset at the time. I just knew that my life could be better somehow, some way. I just didn't know how to get there. And once I realized it was my mindset and I set on a path to change that, everything about my life changed. And I went from scrounging in my couch cushions to find enough change to put gas in my car. That's actually a true story, to co-founding and running $1 billion company, all bootstrapped, by the way. And that change to me was so powerful and just amazing and so cool to go from being insecure about who I was to finding real strength and knowing that my value is based on my willingness to admit where I'm weak, and that working on it and growing it's changed everything about my life. So I promised myself, as I sort of felt that happening and then began to see the results, that I would pay that forward and I would try to get as many people to make that same change as I did, because I don't even need you to work for my company. I just want to live in a world where people realize, hey, the only thing that holds me back is my own mindset. I'm the one putting limitations on myself. And I would love to play some small role in getting as many people out of the matrix, as I call it, as I can. That would be incredibly powerful. So started the show because I could see, I make a promise to any employee that comes and works at Quest that I'm going to make Quest the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to you. And you should only be at Quest for the exact number of days that we're moving you towards your own selfish desires. So don't come here and work for me. Don't come here and work for Quest. Don't worry about making Quest better. Don't worry about making my life better. You worry about making your life better. My job is to create an environment where the more selfish you are, because I know humans tend to do that, the more selfish you are, the better it is for the company, right? So one of the things that I knew we had to do if we were going to do that was get people into a growth mindset. And so I wrote down what have now become sort of memorialized as the 25 bullet points of the Quest belief system. It was the 25 things that I had to change about my own mindset to go from being a broke employee to being a successful entrepreneur, right? So it was me looking back on all the sort of hard knocks and everything that I had to learn by doing it and doing it poorly and stupidly and struggling with the insecurities and feeling dumb and thinking, oh my God, like, am I ever going to find success? So going through all that was very powerful. It was very painful, but it was very powerful. And I, got these pieces of useful wisdom, if you will. And so I wrote them down, and I tell everyone at Quest, this is a treasure map. And if you follow this treasure map, then it will lead you to success in whatever arena you're looking to have success in. But it's really just the 25 things about your current mindset that holds you back. And one thing I tell people, I honestly can't remember all 25 bullet points. I don't have them memorized. So if somebody were going to say to me, hey, what's bullet point 14? I don't have any idea, but I can promise you this. I live it. It is so ingrained in my psyche to live by those 25 bullet points. And that's the point. The point is not to memorize them or be able to spout them. It's to embody them and to approach everything in your life from that lens. And to sum it all up, it's basically you can do anything you set your mind to without exception. Like there's literally nothing that you can't do. And the irony is that the law that follows that one is that's a lie, but it's an empowering lie. And we do and believe anything that moves us towards our goals, right? Once people can get that dichotomy that I knowingly tell myself a lie, but that it's such a powerful lie and that I act in accordance with its truth, that everything about my life changed.
Do you have those listed anywhere where people could check them out?
Yeah, for sure. You can find them on InsideQuest.com. We've got them posted up there.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'll make sure that you guys get a link to that in the show notes. And I've got one more question about the inception of the business. When you guys, first kicked this off, I'm trying to figure out how do you launch and sell boxes of protein bars? That's such a foreign business model to me, and to grow it to where you guys have. What did that process look like when you decided to launch the business? Were you selling direct to consumer online? Did you pursue retail first and foremost? What did you guys do?
The very first thing we did was give the product away. So our whole thing is, if these are really metabolically real, if they're metabolically advantageous, then I should be able to give them to somebody. They should work and they should come back. And by work, I mean twofold. One, you really wanted to eat it because it tasted great. And then two, you started noticing results. So we were on a mission in the early days to give as much product away as we could to the right people. So Tim Ferriss, his book, 4-Hour Work Week, I read it. Completely impacted my life, changed the way that I approach business, but maybe not in the way that most people are thinking. It didn't tell me, hey, work a lot less. More efficiently for sure, but I had no interest in scaling back. I just wanted to get more out of my efforts. The thing that really in that book, I think is maybe the most powerful message is find those 1,000 true fans, those 1,000 people that so believe in what you're doing that they'll buy everything you put out. So we went after those 1,000 true fans in the beginning, and we researched those people and we wrote them handcrafted letters explaining why we thought our product could deliver value to their life. And then we sent them product for free. And I think a lot of them were blown away by how well we knew them as a human being. We knew who they were, what they stood for, what they believed nutritionally, everything. And then here was this product, and all you had to do was try it. If you don't like it, throw it away, give the bars to somebody else, go online, tell people how much you hate us. We're totally fine with that. But if you like it, please go online and tell people that you liked it. And that was all we asked. And we actually kind of got a really cool reputation for, we never ask people to only say something if they're happy. So look, if you're unhappy, I need to know, right? So go ahead, talk openly. We just have to figure out what changes we need to make sure that people aren't saying a lot of bad things about us, because obviously that will create problems for you real fast. So, but it was very powerful. And we went online first. We wanted a direct relationship with the customer. We wanted to acknowledge that there had been just a tectonic shift in the way that the world worked when social media came along. And social media is so powerful for companies. The only gun that you have to your head is that, man, that stuff better work. People better be happy. Because within minutes of an interaction with your product or your company, and I think that's a part that people forget, they have a global audience and they can say something nice or something absolutely damning. So you have to really, really hustle to deliver value. But I think the sole purpose of a business is not to make and sell things. The sole purpose of a business is to deliver value.
That's powerful. So as far as the future of Quest goes, what does that look like for you guys? How are you planning to end metabolic disease?
Well, it really comes down to a few simple things. So one, people eat for pleasure, not for sustenance. And failing to acknowledge that is really, really a problem. The knock-on effect from that is companies over the last 70 years or so. They've gotten really, really good at making things taste good for you. And there's essentially 3 questions that any food company has to ask if you want to have massive global impact. And that's, does the product taste good? Because if it doesn't, no one's going to eat it. Is the product good for you? Which most companies don't ask because it's very, very hard to make something that tastes good and is good for you. And then the third one is it cheap? And so right now, most companies out there, they're asking the first and the third question. Does it taste good? Is it cheap? And they've built just multi-billion-dollar industries around those 2 things. And we see the worldwide pandemic of not just obesity, but all the metabolic diseases. And I mean, there's probably more diseases today that are actually tied to metabolism or entirely causative from what you eat than we even think. But even if it's just metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, all the ones that we know about, then it's terrifying enough. And so going in and creating these foods that people want to eat and are good for them is just absolutely, absolutely critical. And those are the 2 questions that we're trying to answer. The third question, which we are absolutely terrible at right now, is making things cheap. And the irony is we just made an ingredient swap in one of our ingredients. We had a fiber called isomaltyl oligosaccharide, just shorten it to IMO. So we had this IMO fiber. We began to question whether it was as metabolically advantageous as we thought. As soon as we began to question it, we thought we have to move away from this. And the scientific community is now getting behind that. And I think very soon things are going to start coming out showing that IMO just is not as good of a fiber as it could be. So we found another fiber, which is soluble corn fiber. We put that in the bars and people went nuts. And they were like, oh my gosh, you guys are doing this just because it's cheaper. It's actually twice as expensive. And internally as a company, we're literally ridiculous because we don't protect our profitability. We protect the metabolic realities of the product, which was something that goes back to what I was saying. Your job as a company is to deliver value. If I'm not delivering value, I will fade away. By definition, you can trick people into buying stuff for a certain period of time through really clever marketing, but it's never going to last. If we're selling a product and people aren't getting dynamite results from it, we will fade away like so many companies before us. And I think food companies today have to think of themselves as technology companies. You've got to put out a minimum viable product and then make it better all the time. But in the food industry, the thing that we're fighting against, food industry is set and forget, right? You create a recipe and it's the same for 40, 50 years. But in that time, people have sourced better ingredients. They found ways to manufacture better products that use ingredients that we couldn't use before. So for us, we're trying to be the vanguards of just a whole new paradigm in food manufacturing, which is customers need to demand that the products get better over time, better tasting, and better for you metabolically. And then our plea is that people out there take responsibility for looking at what is the food doing for you. So like myself, I take blood readings 3 to 4 times a day just to see like, hey, what I'm eating, how's it impacting me? So that people can see, because anybody that does that, they will realize very, very quickly that IMO spikes your blood sugar more than soluble corn fiber. And for us, that's a non-starter. If you've got a fiber that still spikes insulin, there's something, or blood glucose, there's something wrong. And you can take these readings yourself. So anybody that eats, and there's other bars in the market that have IMO, you can eat one of those bars. You can eat our bar with soluble corn fiber and see for yourself. And that seeing for yourself is really the only thing that matters.
How are you taking those measurements? Is it kind of like a little diabetic pinprick on the finger, or you getting wired up? Because that's a lot, 3-4 times a day.
Yeah, and look, I know that I fall into a much more obsessive camp than most people. It's hilarious how many people at Quest are jabbing their fingers that frequently. But yeah, it's because, unfortunately, of the rampant nature of diabetes, these are very cheap and available over the counter. The strips themselves that do the testing are a little bit more expensive, but it's relatively routine stuff to find on Amazon and to get this stuff pretty easily. And honestly, no one's going to believe me until they try it themselves. It is on a scale of 1 to 10 in the pain department with the devices that they have now to prick your finger. It's a 0.001.
I was going to say it's a 0.
It is, yeah. It is such a non-entity. And then, so I measure blood glucose and I measure ketones and that's a whole nother conversation. But I think there's about to be a big shift in people's perception of fat. dietary fat and its impacts on people metabolically. The scientific community is reversing what is essentially a 30-year position that fat is bad, and people are realizing now that it's got some pretty positive qualities. So it'll be interesting to see where we go with that. But yeah, that's
Is there like a basics 101 guide to blood sugar measuring? Like if I wanted to start that process today, because one, I really would like to start doing that, because I think the insights that you get when you can see your glucose level change after you eat a meal, and the impact that food is actually having on you, and you can see that instantly with feedback, I think would be massive for people.
That is an amazingly good question. I'm going to throw out two names. These are guys in the scientific community that I just hold in the absolute highest esteem. I can't promise that they have a 101 guide, but if they don't, I will encourage them to make one. Peter Attia is the first name. He founded the Nutritional Science Initiative. If you watch his TED Talk, it is absolutely breathtaking. He was a guy that really believed that people that got obese, they just didn't have the willpower to, be in shape. And he was a surgeon and just really, really judged this woman, and finally ends up realizing that it's not her fault, certainly not entirely her fault, and that there's things happening to the food supply that are just making it incredibly difficult for people that aren't just like hyper educated to avoid some of the pitfalls. And his retelling of that tale is so emotional, and you understand why he then embarks, giving his career over entirely to doing true scientific studies on nutrition, which hadn't been done before. Everything had been correlative studies. So he's doing these really powerful causative studies, and he has a blog called The Eating Academy, and he just talks about blood sugar and all kinds of amazing things. So I can't recommend that highly enough. Eating Academy by Peter Attia. And then the other one is Dr. Jacob Wilson. He's out of Tampa, Florida. He's doing just some cutting edge research, largely in the field of ketogenics, which is sort of the flip side of the blood sugar equation. And if he doesn't, he's quite young, so he puts things out that are really digestible in a way that people can really understand, especially for millennials. Just a very powerful communicator. So if he didn't have something on the topic, I'd be surprised.
I will definitely dive into both of those. I think that'll be hugely eye-opening for anyone who goes down that path. And I'm really excited that was y'all's mission. I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that you had defined it. Really, it's interesting, as narrow, but as broad as, curing metabolic disease, if you will. And I am on a similar path, very, very resonant with that, with just a slightly different approach, which is the inspiration behind the hydroponics business, which is my goal is to put clean, organic produce back on the family dinner table at night. So I read a statistic about a year and a half ago that mentioned the average bunch of conventional spinach that you would buy at a normal grocery store has 54 different pesticide residues on it. And I read that and I was just like, that is unbelievable, because if you're not in the top 3 to 5% of society and you can't afford to spend hundreds of dollars a week at Whole Foods for just clean food, not special food, it's just not full of chemicals, then you're out of luck, and you're literally feeding yourself and your family poison on a daily basis, even if that's in the form of vegetables or fruit. So I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing. It is very close to my heart and what I'm dedicating the majority of my life to moving forward. So Tom, thank you so much for the time today and what you guys are doing for the world.
Man, it's such a pleasure, and I'm so excited to hear that you've got something that you're passionate about, that you're going to bring to the world. I really believe that is the new state of entrepreneurialism, and you've got people that are just out there on a mission to do something, and they're willing to learn the business tactics to pull it off. It's awesome, dude.
Absolutely. Well, it wouldn't be possible without individuals like yourself who are blazing the path and offering your mentorship to individuals like myself and everybody else out there, especially in such a free and open way that you've been doing with the podcast and everything else on your vlog and on your YouTube channel. And so what are the two best ways for people to connect with you? First and foremost, how can they try the bars? And then two, where should they go to connect with you and follow the podcast and get involved with Inside Quest?
You can find the products in virtually any grocery store, gym, health food chain, but we're in traditional grocery and all that good stuff. And then you can also buy them online if you're an online shopper at questnutrition.com. The podcast and everything you can find at youtube.com/Inside Quest, or you can go to Stitcher, iTunes. It's Inside Quest. And then if you want to connect with me personally, it's at Tom Bilyeu. Unfortunately, my name is spelled a little weird, but it's B as in Bravo, ILYEU. I try to be super active on social. The ones, if you really want to engage with me, Twitter and YouTube, oddly enough, man, that our YouTube community for Inside Quest has gotten so cool that I try to go and respond to every single person that leaves a comment. Just because I think the way they're helping each other is so incredible, and I want to do anything I can to encourage that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time today. This was absolutely priceless wisdom, and man, it's so awesome to have you on the show, and thank you for your leadership. And I'll just end with one last question here. We've got about 60 seconds left. What can we help you with? What is your biggest challenge right now that we could possibly, recommend a resource to you or help you with or support you with?
I want to light people on fire. So the reason that we're doing the food that we're doing is to get the problems of the body out of the way so that people can find that thing that they're passionate about and bring to the world. Like you, what you're doing with the hydroponics, we need an army. We need millions, maybe, hundreds of millions of people that are out there living their most authentic, passionate life and pushing past the crazy obstacles that come their way. So just pay this stuff forward, man. If you learn something on this show, pay it forward. That's all I would ever ask of anyone.
Awesome. Well, Tom Bilyeu, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks, Mike.